This is 5 Live Formula One with Jack Nichols.
Third free practice session ahead of the first race of the 2023 Formula One World Championship. One more hour of running to come. Will it corroborate what we saw the last, yesterday and the 3 days of testing last weekend? Or will we see something slightly different emerge? We are about to find out, as I say, over this final hour. It's a very warm day in Bahrain, 28 degrees, the air temperature here, track temperature up at 41.4, so different conditions to qualifying later on. But with these new cars, the teams will still be pretty keen to get out there and learn as much as possible going into the qualifying session later on. That gets underway in 6 o'clock here in Bahrain, and that's 3 o'clock in the UK, which you can hear on Sports Extra as well. Everywhere, wherever you're listening now, you can hear qualifying and the race tomorrow. Race tomorrow gets underway at 6 o'clock in the evening here in Bahrain, which is 3 o'clock in the UK. With us for commentary this weekend is the former Mercedes F1 reserve driver and current Jaguar Formula E driver, Sam Bird. We've also got the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. Rosanna Tennant is down in the pits for us this weekend. And Sam, everybody really is talking about Fernando Alonso, because Red Bull being at the front is not a huge amount of shock. Ferrari being a bit behind them and Mercedes being a bit behind them, a bit shocking at times, and we'll get on to Mercedes as the session progresses. But Alonso looked fast yesterday, and everyone's just walking around the paddock asking, is it genuine?
I think it is genuine. The people that I've spoken to are saying that the pace that they have displayed yesterday is genuine pace, which is so exciting, Jack. So exciting to see Fernando Alonso potentially fighting really at the sharp end for the first time in a long time. The other talking point up and down the paddock, I must say, is the issues surrounding Mercedes. It just feels like they have gone down a bad rabbit hole and they can't get out of it at the moment. That's the genuine feeling up and down the pit lane right now.
Lewis Hamilton, Andrew, described it as the wrong path yesterday. Simple as that. He wasn't mincing his words yesterday, was he?
No, he's kicked straight out of the car, said we're on the wrong track and we're miles off the pace. Which is ironic, because not many more than a couple of hours before that, the technical director of the team, Mike Elliott, had been sitting there going, well, we're going to have to wait and see how far off we are before we decide how much work we've got to do, how big the mountain to climb is and everything. And he was also saying that, because the big talking point is Mercedes car concept. It's so different from everybody else's. And Mike Elliott was saying, well, we've done so much research on different design philosophies, and we're convinced this is the right one for us. And there's Hamilton saying, well, I don't think it is. And of course, if Mike Elliott thinks that and the Mercedes technical department think that, you have to say that raises fundamental questions about everything that's going on at the Mercedes factory, from people to tools to everything. Because why do they not understand why they've got it wrong?
It does seem, Rosanna, a bit of a mystery at the moment, and a lot of head scratching at Mercedes.
Yeah, it does. And I think, first and foremost, hello. I think I can almost see you from the pit lane looking up to the commentary boxes. It does seem a bit of a mystery. I just had a quick word with Andrew Shovlin, their chief race engineer at Mercedes, as I was heading to the pit lane. And I said, we're kind of billing it as engineering pride as to why you won't switch and follow the Red Bull direction when it comes to side pods.
Did you say that to him?
Yeah, I did. Well, I just felt otherwise we keep on using that phrase, and I just wanted to check in that we were correct. And he said, the thing is, and maybe we already kind of understand this, the thing is, you can't just throw money at the problem. You can't just redesign the car. They're too far along, and I think to change concept now would take even longer. So I think they have to stick to their guns, but they acknowledge that Aston Martin basically going in the Red Bull direction has brought performance to their car. So I imagine it's a tough pill to swallow, but I guess they would change it if they could, and maybe it's because the time is against them and the budget is against them, Andrew.
Well, there is a change coming, Rosanna. Toto Wolff said at the launch of the car that there were some new side pods coming a few races down the line. We don't know exactly when. Mike Elliott was confirming that yesterday, saying we've got different side pods. He wouldn't say what was different about them or when they would come. But given that they have literally no side pods on the car at the moment, you have to assume that's going to mean bigger side pods. So even if it's not exactly the Red Bull direction, it's got to be moving in that. It's got to be moving that way. just one thought about Aston Martin. Logically, it makes no sense. Teams don't go from 7th in the championship one year to being close to or at the very front in the next year. In Formula 1, that just tends not to happen. You can only think of a very, very small handful of times when that has happened. But everyone you speak to in the paddock believes it is true, and all the evidence from the testing yesterday also suggests it's true. If that was a normal Friday from a normal Grand Prix weekend, we would be talking about Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin as pole and victory contenders. And people think that Red Bull is still the strongest team, but they think Alonso will be right up there.
One thing that we haven't spoken about, I think, is Ferrari. Now, Ferrari, we predicted would be the second best team this weekend, and we haven't really talked about them because of the performance of Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin yesterday. But I had a nice little chat with my old boss, Fred Vasseur at Ferrari, and he was pretty bullish about their performance this weekend. I think that they weren't running at full speed yesterday, and we should see more of them later today.
Well, Aston Martin's where all the attention is at the moment, Rosanna.
It certainly is, and it was yesterday, but today it's ramped up. I'm standing at the edge of Fernando Alonso's garage. He is standing looking at his car, the AMR 23. He's got his race suit rolled down, his fireproofs on. He's standing with his arms folded, cap on, so not getting in the car anytime soon, and the mechanics are just putting the car back together for him. But I can't tell you, there are 20 people, maybe, photographers and film crews just trying to get a glimpse of him, because he is the man of the moment. I think this is a storyline that people have wanted to see for a long time in the sport. Fernando Alonso choosing a team that's on the up or is going to peak at some point, I imagine, at the right time. So I think this is a bit of a fairy tale potential coming our way in Formula 1 in 2023.
Yeah, we'll speak more about Ferrari in a bit, but just to go back to that Aston Martin thing, the thing I can't quite work out, Andrew, is that there was chit chat a week ago. Oh, Aston Martin look all right. Aston Martin look all right. Maybe they're ahead of Mercedes. Yeah, maybe. But Mercedes are like, nah, we're still ahead of them. Aston are still like, nah, we're still behind Mercedes. Everybody thought, and this is where I'm still fairly sceptical on it, to be perfectly honest with you. Because why didn't we see this last weekend, and why are we suddenly so surprised that this is how quick Aston Martin are? When they looked decent, head of the midfield last week, if after Sunday's running last weekend, someone had written a story saying that they were going to contend for race wins, everyone would have thought you were mad.
Well, it still feels...
So would Aston Martin.
I don't know. I mean, it's still... I'm
Aston
sure...
Martin have said to you this weekend, no, we'll be behind Mercedes, right? Well, they've
kind of,
at least.
Yeah, so look, the thing is, we don't as the media, we don't have all the data from testing. The other teams have kind of been saying, Alonso did a long run on Friday afternoon in testing that looked super impressive, and I've seen that long run overlaid on some data, and it does look unbelievably impressive. It was comparing to, I think, a Ferrari and Mercedes and maybe an Alpine or something like that, and it was demonstrably quicker. His race simulation run yesterday, over 15 laps compared to 17 laps for Verstappen or something like that, or maybe the other way around in the numbers. He was 200ths of a second slower on average than Verstappen over that time. You can say fuel loads, but why would they run a low fuel load on the race simulation run in Friday practice? It doesn't make any sense. It's just, you wouldn't do that as a professional racing team, and I don't think he would want, certainly Fernando Alonso wouldn't want to do that either. Now, I did speak to him before practice yesterday. We had a little coffee together and a chat, and he was like, nah, I'm going to qualify around about 8th or 9th and finish about 6th. But it's Fernando. He doesn't always tell the truth, man.
Why wouldn't yesterday? Why when you're sharing a little latte together or something? Why wouldn't he say, yeah, Andrew, we could be quite near the front? Well, why would he say I'm going to be 8?
Well, the interesting thing about it was I actually went to go and see him. I'd been speaking to someone else in the paddock, and he walked past and gave me one of those Formula 1 handshakes, the sort of, I don't know what they're called.
Oh, what, the European handshake?
Yeah, that one, with the thumbs and the clasp hands thing. And I said, it's looking pretty good for you. And he goes, just wait and see.
Oh,
and then he walked off.
And then you went to see him and he said, just wait and see, we're going to be ninth.
Exactly. So the two things don't add up, right? And so look, I don't know. I mean, what I can say is that it's like disbelief and excitement all wrapped in at once in the paddock at the moment over him and Aston Martin. I mean, look,
David says, hang on, I'll quickly do you a sync. Sorry, everybody. 54 minutes and 40, 39, 38, 37 seconds to go. On hashtag BBC F1, David says, could this just be track specific for Aston Martin?
Of course it could. This is just one track, and that's the one thing to say about Ferrari, by the way. They're apparently their problem is tyre degradation. And this is a bad track for tyre degradation. So they may, even if they qualify well, they may go backwards in the race. But just to go back to Alonso, I think the thing is that he's been in a kind of competitive purgatory for the last 10 years. His last pole was in Hockenheim in 2012. His last race win was in Spain in 2013. And he's an absolute superstar of Formula One. He's got charisma to burn. And you might not like him, right? You might not like him as a character, but he's a one-man story machine, and he's like one-man drama creator. And to have him back at the front, and he's also one of the greatest racing drivers of all time, to have him back at the front in Formula One would be good for the entire sport. I was speaking to someone at Red Bull this morning, and they were like, just imagine Max against Fernando for the championship. He was like, they're good friends at the moment, but how long is that going to last?
That's quite a pairing of personalities. Let's put it that way.
A little question for you.
Okay.
You've got to guess the answer. How many races ago was Fernando Alonso's last Formula One win? Do you know the answer?
What, so the 2013 Spanish Grand Prix?
Well, how many races ago was that? What are you going to go for?
I'm going to go 156.
It was 154.
Oh, so I've obviously seen that somewhere this morning and forgotten it a little bit. Rosanna, what do you think the answer is?
I don't know, but isn't he going for his 33rd victory?
Yeah,
I'm going to dodge
like
the stat question. I just wanted to check with Andrew, though, because the data that I had heard about, obviously I don't actually go and deep dive in the team's garages while I'm down in the pit lane, was that when Max was on his long run yesterday, which was a 15-lap run, he was way more consistent and actually lapping quicker at the end of the stint, whereas conversely Fernando did 13 laps and was 2 seconds slower than he was at the beginning of his stint. So that would suggest the Aston Martin is going to eat his tyres a little bit in race trim on that soft tyre, which we think is going to be the race tyre, right?
And as we've said before, it's a very aggressive asphalt here, which can cost you sort of, which, as we've alluded to with Ferrari, can eat up the tyres a little more.
So the averages were 200ths apart.
Yeah.
That is a fact. It is true that by the end of this, so Alonso's last 3 laps were a 38.1, a 37.4 and a 37.9. Verstappen's last 3 laps were a 37.1, a 37.2 and a 37.5. So that does suggest Verstappen has an advantage. But obviously Alonso must have been quicker earlier in the stint. And of course you can't be absolutely sure, because you've got... A race is not a race simulation. A race simulation, you're able to prepare your tyres, you can be a bit careful around traffic and everything. In a race, you've got to be on it straight away. And that brings its own demands and differences on the tyre usage and everything. So these are all just clues. But I think the overarching point is that it looks like Aston Martin are there or thereabouts, close to the front of the field. Do people believe that Fernando Alonso's going to put it on pole? If people were going to bet, I think they would probably not bet on Alonso, right? But just the fact that he's up there and close in a car that finished 7th in the championship last year is just one of the most remarkable stories Formula One's had in many years, and I think everyone's just savouring that at the moment.
Cameron says, I love Fernando in this mood. The fact he tells Benson 2 competing stories completely in private, that's what I need in F1. So yeah, right, we'll move on from that for now. 50 minutes and 35 seconds left on the clock. Let's go back down to the pit lane. Rosanna.
A few cars are still left in the pit lane, actually, Jack, because of course it's scorching hot at the moment, which isn't the conditions we'll find ourselves in later this evening for qualifying. So I'm just standing at the Red Bull garages, and until about 45 seconds ago, Sergio Perez's car was kind of in bits, really. No front end, tyres off, up on the sort of highest jacks, as it were. He is in the garage, similarly dressed to Fernando Alonso. He's got his overalls down, his fireproofs on, cap on, talking to his engineer, Hugh Bird. And then as I walk across to Max Verstappen's garage, you can hear the car is fired up, but Max still very much in his casuals. He's got his cap on, having a chat actually with Dr. Helmut Marko at the moment. But they are taking their time, the Red Bulls. Oh, just putting a bit of power through the engine there. So it might be some time until we see the Red Bulls out, but it's hot. Do they need to waste time out on track at the moment and use up mileage and things like that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, they've still only got the 2 sets of tyres to run in this session as well. So there'll be. I imagine one will be a sort of short, soft tyre run a little bit later on, and then whatever other tyre they need to get rid of before qualifying. One other little Alonso fact: 22 years ago today, apparently, was his Grand Prix debut for Minardi at the 2001 Australian Grand Prix. Stu G says, while we're on the stats, neither of McLaren's drivers this year had been born the last time the team won the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, for you mean for the seat cracked a bit, like it used to last year. Okay, understood.
Slightly cracked seat for Carlos Sainz. The Mercedes of George Russell coming into turn 1. Both Mercedes have gone out on circuit on the soft tyres. So have the Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. And he now comes up towards turn 4, George Russell. I mean, we touched on it earlier, Sam, but how Mercedes, if they have got it this wrong sort of 2 years in a row, I'm not, you know, but do changes need to be made at the team? How does it work when you've been so successful for so long? 2 dodgy years doesn't mean you throw everything out of the window, surely.
No, you don't throw everything out the window, but you do have to start looking at people within their roles or people below them, and the philosophies that they're using right now, and the direction that they've gone with the aerodynamics and sort of geometry and setup design is clearly not working right now. But it's a case of unpicking it and working out how they can still kind of go down a similar path to what they're doing right now, because they can't change. They've put all their chips into this now. If they completely abandon this, it's not feasible economically, and also on a time frame. It would probably take them longer to completely redesign than it would be to try and find a fix to what they've got right now. So I don't think there's a short-term fix at the moment with Mercedes.
Across the line come the Mercedes now. Hamilton does a 33.5 on the soft tyre compared to a 31.5 yesterday, so still a couple of seconds off the pace, and probably won't see that come in this hot second practice session. Have there been any changes at Mercedes, Andrew? If you think back to sort of, were there any like major departures in the 2020, 2021 period that are sort of now wreaking their havoc on the team?
Well, look, the big yes is the answer. There was a massive change between the 21 and 22 seasons, in that James Allison, who was their technical director, was promoted to be chief technical officer of the entire group, and Mike Elliott, who was his deputy, was then promoted to technical director. At the same time, the guy who'd led Mercedes engine department for many years, who created this revolutionary hybrid engine which dominated, Formula 1 when the engine rules were changed from 2014 onwards until everybody caught up, a guy called Andy Cowell, he left the company completely, and he was replaced by his deputy, Huell Thomas. Now, I think if I pronounce his name right. And James Allison was regarded as the next best technical mind in Formula 1 after Adrian Newey at Red Bull. Not only that, but he's an incredible communicator. You can sit and listen to James talk about anything all day. He's just a compelling personality, and he's got a natural authority about him in a way that I don't know Mike Elliott at all. I've only seen him in press conferences, haven't had a chance to get to know him properly yet, in a way that Mike Elliott isn't, in the same kind of personality. I'm not saying that Mike Elliott can't lead the team in the same way as James Allison has, but you have to ask the question, is that just a coincidence that they so dropped off in competitiveness at a time that those two huge changes were made at the top of the two technical departments of the team?
But if that was between 2021 and 2022 car, which was a, failure as far as Mercedes are concerned, the worst one they've ever made, etc.
Well, James Allison was stepping away already through 2021.
Okay, fine. So he wasn't involved in that.
He was involved, but not as much as he had been. Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, what do you think, Sam? You know that organisation pretty well, and all those people pretty well. You work with them.
Bearing in mind, when I was at Mercedes, they were not a very competitive team. They obviously inherited the Brawn team. It became Mercedes, and 2010 was kind of a Brawn upgrade, and then we went from there. It was only when the rule change happened in 2014 that Mercedes became the dominant force that we've seen over the last sort of 8-9 years, and everything was put towards the rule change. I mean, we started on the simulator for the hybrid era back in 2011, Andrew. I mean, it was and no one else was doing it, and we were getting data from the sim and taking that to the FIA in order to then almost bend the rules to suit our powertrain. So because nobody else was doing it, the FIA were coming to Mercedes going, look, what are you finding? Because we need the info.
And maybe I could be wrong here. Wasn't Andy Cowell part of the KERS team as well back in 2009?
Yeah.
And Mercedes had the best KERS system back then, or something like that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure why it's going wrong, because they have got incredible people sitting there in charge of all of these departments. So it's a powerhouse, Mercedes, of brilliant minds.
Bernard points out Aldo Costa.
Aldo Costa was there, yeah. Yeah,
but he also is one of the people who left. Yeah, so it's a mystery. It's a mystery to them as well. I think it seems there was. I've never really had much interaction with James Allison, but as you say, seems like a very personable man, and all of those things you just said. And I've only met him properly once, which was Mercedes invited two blind F1 fans to the factory because they'd been in touch and sent a letter in or something, and Mercedes invited them in to show them around and let them feel the car and feel everything, because they didn't know what a car looked like, and they invited me along as well because obviously they listen on the radio, and James Allison came in and was just so like charismatic and kind to these two young blind girls that had come in to experience it, and telling all these stories about Kimi Räikkönen that didn't necessarily feel appropriate at some points, but he has some good Kimi Räikkönen stories to tell you about that, but I think, and it was just phenomenal. It was a really, really special thing to see James Allison being that sort of open and friendly and generous with his time. It was really quite remarkable. Anyway, that's my only James Allison story, but it was a really lovely day. That's a tangent for you. 41 minutes and 30 seconds to go. Morris says, this is all very interesting, but are you not going to commentate on what's going on? Okay, for you, Morris, I will. Charles Leclerc is on an outlap, just coming down to the final corner now. Hamilton's quickest on that 1 minute 33.5 we mentioned a few minutes ago. Sainz is second fastest. Leclerc is third fastest. They're all actually within a tenth of a second of each other, all within 66 thousandths of a second, Hamilton, Sainz and Leclerc. Russell is 6 tenths further back on the soft tyre, but a lot of drivers are still in the pits. Only half the field have been out on circuit yet, and Charles Leclerc now coming around the first corner in the Ferrari.
So we noticed that the Ferrari is a little bit harder on its tyre than other cars, and with this track temperature, Jack, at 41 degrees, Leclerc was crawling through Sector 2 and Sector 3 on his outlap because he just doesn't want to take anything out of the tyres on an abrasive surface, and a hot surface at that.
He's 500ths up on Hamilton in the first sector. Down through the gears, couple of goes at getting it turned into the right-hander of turn 8. Car looked a little lively as he tried to turn in there. Then he comes into the sweeping downhill left-handers of turns 9 and 10, where his teammate Carlos Sainz had a big spin yesterday, kept it out of the wall, but that ruined his set of medium tyres that he was on at that point, as Leclerc now makes his way up towards turn 11, down through the gears, swings it into the left-hander, and now we'll get a middle sector split for Charles Leclerc. Comes now up into the right-hander, and he is almost 2 tenths up on Lewis Hamilton. This is a decent run here from Leclerc. The order at the moment: Hamilton, Sainz, Leclerc, Bottas, Zhou, the top 5, Russell, Stroll, Norris and Hülkenberg, the 10 drivers to have set a lap time so far. A bit wide at the final corner for Leclerc of the Apex. Comes through now, and I think he might have lost a little bit of time in that final corner, and slots into second place. Doesn't even do a personal best in that final sector. So Hamilton quickest, Sainz is second. Leclerc actually stays in third, I should say. So found 7 thousandths of a second on that lap compared to the previous one. But he and Sainz very evenly matched at the moment. Still the Red Bulls sitting in the pit lane, not looking like they are heading out anytime soon. George Russell has just rolled out of the garage to join the track. As I say that, they're about to send Verstappen out on a set of hard tyres.
Set of hards, wow. I think Ferrari is struggling in Sector 3, Jack. I think that they've got the potential in these temperatures to overheat the external of the tyre, and it puts a little bit too much, it makes it too difficult. You've seen that Carlos Sainz is struggling all the time out of 13, that the rear of the car squirming around as he tries to get on the power, and also now Charles Leclerc making mistakes in the final corner.
38 minutes and 23 seconds to go. Fernando Alonso now coming into the final corner in his dark green Aston Martin. Gets on the power out of the final turn. He's on a set of soft tyres here, Fernando Alonso, so we'll see whether this is going to be a push lap or not. He's got the DRS open as he comes down the start-finish straight. A Williams just emerging from the pit lane. Only driver yet to leave the pits is Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, who looked reasonable on long-run pace yesterday. The Alpines, not setting the world alight, but fairly solid. Alonso up towards turn 4 now. How is he compared to Hamilton in Sector 1? The answer is quicker by a quarter of a second. So Fernando Alonso very quick through the first sector. As I say, Gasly the only driver left in the pits. Well, Magnussen, Norris and Zhou have all returned to the pits, but everybody else has decided that with 40 minutes to go in the session, that's the time to head out on circuit. Alonso down through turns 9 and 10 now. Opens the DRS again. Lewis Hamilton's had a run through the pits. Everybody is on the soft tyres at the start of this session, bar the 2 Haas drivers who've run on the mediums, and Perez and Verstappen in the Red Bulls who've gone out on the hards. Alonso's almost half a second up here on Hamilton and the Ferraris.
It's not even been that great a lap either. He was wide of the apex at turn 8. It wasn't. He had a car on the way into turn 12 there out of turn 11. Yeah, let's see him finish the lap.
Gets on the power out of the final corner, drives to the line, and Fernando Alonso is going to go to the top of the times here by how much? Just under 4 tenths of a second. A 33.1 for Fernando Alonso. Yesterday his lap time was 30.9, so actually only 2 tenths down on yesterday's session, which is not too bad considering the hotter track temperatures. As I say, up at 40.8 degrees at the moment. Air temperature up at 28. So the order is Alonso, Hamilton, Sainz, Leclerc and Ocon, the top 5. Bottas, Stroll, Zhou, Russell, Tsunoda, the top 10. And then Norris, De Vries, Hülkenberg and Magnussen, the 14 drivers that have set a lap time. Piastri comes through to go 7th fastest on those soft tyres. 34.0 for Oscar Piastri. Is that his quickest lap of the weekend? No, not at all. So, sorry, I was talking utter nonsense about Alonso a moment ago. He's not 2 tenths off his time from yesterday. He's 2.2 tenths off his time from yesterday. So, okay, apologies for that. So, yeah, he's still a long way off the pace of yesterday, but Piastri only 9 tenths away from Fernando Alonso, whereas yesterday he ended the session 1.1 seconds away from Fernando Alonso. Here come the Red Bulls out of the final corner now. Verstappen will be first across the line, and he goes 5th, 6 tenths away from Fernando Alonso, but on the hard tyre compared to Alonso on the softs. And Sergio Perez goes 8th fastest, 9 tenths slower than Fernando Alonso and half a second slower than his teammate. Albon jumps up into 8th place on the soft tyres. Sound you can hear now is Lewis Hamilton, who's done another run and remains second quickest, but manages to find a little smidge of time there as well on a 33.495. So the top 5, Alonso, Hamilton, Sainz, Leclerc and Verstappen, but Verstappen on the hard tyres currently.
One thing we should say, by the way, about Red Bull is that they weren't as quick as everyone was expecting yesterday, and one of the reasons for that is that they were not happy with the setup at all. Verstappen had understeer, which is a thing he hates more than anything in the world, I think, and they weren't able to get on top of it, and they didn't really understand completely why yesterday. It wasn't a wind. They thought they'd gone through all the wind direction changes in the course of testing at one time or another, but obviously they'll have dug down into the data on that overnight. So if they can fix that understeer, it's quite possible that Red Bull will make quite a significant leap today, and all this excitement about Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso will fizzle out. But let's wait and see.
I actually spoke to Checo's management, who managed me as well, so I was having a coffee with them at the Red Bull VIP hospitality suite here in the paddock, and they were saying that right now what it seems like is Red Bull have delivered the beginning of season car that suits Checo quite nicely. Again, a bit like last year, it has a little bit of inherent understeer in it, but they're under no illusions that at some point that will turn to some oversteer. Development will happen and upgrades will come onto that car, and it will turn towards a Max Verstappen car. But right now, they're happy with Checo. Checo's very happy with the car, driving well, and I think the understeer car is tending to suit him more than Max.
Nick de Vries comes across the line in the AlphaTauri. He goes 16th fastest, 1.8 seconds slower than Alonso and a second slower than his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. So maybe differing run plans potentially there between de Vries and Tsunoda, because that's a fairly big chunk of a gap. With Alonso quickest at the moment, Hamilton second, Sainz third, Leclerc fourth, Verstappen fifth. Verstappen just did another lap and improved on those hard tyres, but he's still half a second away, as you would expect. In fact, no, he didn't. He didn't do another lap. That was still his lap from last time, but he just did an incredibly slow cool-down lap. Well, a lot of the drivers are, to be honest. They're doing sort of 3 minutes cool-down laps, so they're doing 50% pace basically in order to try and recover those tyres, as Sam was talking about earlier. Quite aggressive on the tyres, this Bahrain circuit. Approaching the halfway point of the session. You need another sync. 32 minutes and 0 seconds left on the clock. And returning to the pits now is Lance Stroll. So Stroll at the moment is 12th quickest, 9 tenths slower than Fernando Alonso. And it's going to be quite a year this for Lance Stroll, I think, because he's had toughish teammates in the past. Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion, maybe not at the top of his game in the last few years, potentially, arguably, but up against Alonso, who's kind of demolished most of his teammates. It's going to be a big year this for Stroll, I think.
There's nobody in the paddock. Well, you could argue Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, but to be honest, it seems like nobody is quite as relentless as Fernando Alonso, both in and outside of the car. I've heard stories that are great about him outside of the car. I've heard stories that are fairly divisive as well. I mean, he is very demanding of the people that he works with. He's also demanding of the fact that, look, if there's an upgrade and if there's one front wing there, I'm having it, and that's the end of the story because I'm the number one driver. So I think it will be difficult for Lance Stroll. He's going to have to play second fiddle to one of the greatest of all time. And how's that going to affect his mind, and how is is father going to, over the course of a year, it's all fine and at the beginning and saying it's okay, it's fine, I can cope with this, but if Lance Stroll gets to a position where he's getting trounced every single weekend, it could ruffle some feathers with the Strolls.
Sainz being a bit slidey into the final corner, and now heading back towards the pit lane. But I'm really interested in that story. Even if you, obviously, the Lawrence Stroll part of it is not something you can ignore. But even just looking at it from just a fundamental, basic two teammates kind of point of view, I think it's going to be really, really interesting. Alonso has now returned to the pit lane, just passes in front of us, his yellow crash helmet sticking out from the top of the green Aston Martin with less than 30 minutes to go.
I just think it's interesting, Jack, going back to the Aston Martin thing. I mean, Lawrence Stroll, from a business side of things, has made absolutely the right choice in hiring one of the best drivers on the grid in Fernando Alonso. But then there's, obviously he's got a great business mind, but there's an emotional connection there as well. He employs his son to drive in his team, and it wonon't be fun watching his son getting beaten most, if not all, weekends.
No grip. Okay, we'll try again.
Max Verstappen saying he's got no grip on the hard tyres. I find it strange that Red Bull are trying the hard tyre. I don't see that working, especially.
I think that I would suggest they're just using them up,
burning a set.
And this is the most unrepresentative point of the weekend, I suppose.
Absolutely. I mean, what's your take on the whole Aston Martin situation there, Andrew?
Well, the first thing to say is that Lance Stroll's driving with 2 injured wrists this weekend.
There's an interesting. Let's get stuck into that really quickly. There's this there's a lot of people saying he shouldn't be driving. A lot of some people on hashtag BBC F1, Andrew, saying it's very concerning that he's driving with two injured wrists and whatever, and he can't turn the wheel properly, and that's bad. But I'm wondering if that's Hamilton doing that, or Verstappen doing that, or Leclerc doing that. Everyone's hailing them a hero for driving through the pain, and if Alonso's doing that, but because there's this sort of understandable, don't get me wrong, sort of perception or negativity towards Stroll, suddenly it's the guy's, he's not even fit to race. Whereas normally we love a guy that's fit to race. Niki Lauda shouldn't have raced at Monza in 1976.
You've hit the nail on the head there, Jack. Formula One driving is about, you get in the car and you drive it as fast as you possibly can until the race finishes, unless you're physically not capable of doing it. And if he thinks he can drive the car, then it's absolutely up to him to drive the car, and he should be driving the car because it's his job. Yeah. Now, there are various tests involved in Formula One. You have to be able to get out of the cockpit within 5 seconds. For obvious safety reasons, if it's a fire or something. He passed that test. There is some talk about it needed 2 goes to do it, but fair enough. If he passed it, he passed it. And if he's in some pain, well, that's just what happens when you're a racing driver sometimes. Racing cars are not comfortable. I've not driven a Formula One car, Sam has, but they're not a comfortable experience even when you are fully physically fit. And there are all manner of things that happen to drivers in races and in Grand Prix weekends where they're having to drive in discomfort. It might be cramp, like Verstappen had in Abu Dhabi in 2021, for example. Nigel Mansell was famously sitting in a bath of fuel for his Grand Prix debut and drove through it,
Webber vomiting in the car.
Webber vomited in his helmet. Fernando Alonso
broke his shoulder, didn't he? And
broke
for the
his
rest
collarbone
of the season,
and had to carry on when he was fighting for the title.
In Malaysia in 2005, I think it was, Alonso was really quite seriously ill, and in the course of the race, which he finished second, he called him on the radio and said, I think you're going to need to have a doctor ready for me at the end of the race.
Hamilton with his back in Baku.
Exactly. So it's what drivers do. Now, having said all of that, Stroll did. We don't know exactly what Stroll did to his wrists because he hasn't said. Word in the paddock is that he broke at least one of them, and that he's been to a doctor in Spain who's famous for getting the MotoGP guys back on their bikes when they have big injuries, and he fixed him up with some screws in at least one of his wrists. And I heard today someone saying that the FIA doctor had looked at them and couldn't believe the quality of the work that had gone on with those screws in Stroll's wrist.
Nice action.
And we can see that he was moving the wheel a little bit like Robert Kubica was sometimes when he was driving for Williams, with one hand pushing from underneath and so on yesterday. He insisted he can drive. He insisted he was just protecting his wrist. So, given that's the circumstance he was in, to be half a second off Alonso, having never driven the car before, remember he didn't even do testing. Everyone was impressed by that.
I've got to say it is impressive because, I mean, I broke my hand in a race last year in London in Formula E, and I had to drive through the pain throughout the whole race. Anyway, I couldn't then do the last couple of races of the year. I had the operation to fix the snapped bone in my hand, and then a couple of months later we had pre-season testing, and at the end of the Valencia track they created a chicane for us in Formula E, and even then 2 months later I still had pain when negotiating the chicane. So fair play to him. He'll be in discomfort, he'll be cortisoned up and have the best physios there, but it takes some courage to get out there.
Sam, I've got a question for you. When you were racing in...
Too much understeer and in off-front.
Gasly's got too much understeer. Carry on with your question, Rosanna. It's probably more interesting than that.
Gosh, now you've really put the pressure on me. Sam, I just wondered though, when you maybe came close to another driver on track, was there ever a moment that you thought, I can't react quick enough to get out of a sticky spot because of the injury? And that's what I'm worrying about for Lance Stroll this weekend, that is he going to be able to avoid a collision? What happens if he hits someone? And then there's a chain of events, isn't there? And I sort of then try and think of it in terms of road car, and I broke my wrist about 10 years ago, and I remember people saying, don't drive.
Was it a cycling accident?
It was actually. I broke my scaphoid.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't have to have an operation, so I was put in a cast. So, okay, that's a bit of a different thing, but people say don't drive, because if you have a collision, your insurance won't cover it. Okay, we're talking about Formula One, but there is a bit of a question in terms of, you know, impacting someone else's race if you aren't able to get out of a sticky spot. And also, Andrew, I know he managed it in 2, but you only get one shot at getting out of a car if it's on fire.
Yeah, so a couple of interesting things there, Rosanna. I think it's really good questions. I actually broke my scaphoid as well on a road bike about 1 week before the start.
Skateboard friends.
Yeah, skateboard friends. Woo! 1 week before the GP2 Championship started in 2013, and I had to start the season with sort of this half-cast thing on my right wrist, and it was incredibly painful. It's not that it's irresponsible of him to be driving or anything like that. He can get out the car. He's proven that. And he's no danger to anybody else out there because he's a professional driver and he's capable of driving these cars. The one worry is if he were to have another crash, he were to crash his Formula One car this weekend, and some kind of awful kickback through the steering wheel means that he does more damage to the wrist or to the hand, and that then puts him back even further than the original injury. That's probably the only concern.
Yeah, I've actually been having this conversation with Robin Freins, the Formula E driver, because he broke his wrist, I think, or hand or something, and wanted to come back as quickly as possible. But it's like if you come back and have another one, then it's going to be way worse than kind of letting it heal properly. And that was kind of your thing with Seoul last year, I guess, is that if you were in the championship fight going into the final race of the season and the title's on the line, you're racing in Seoul. But if there's nothing to, necessarily fight for at that point, it's best to let it heal properly. Interesting chat on the hashtag BBC F1. Laura Amy saying any driver on track with an injury that's hampering their ability should not be on track, full stop. People claiming that if it was Hamilton or Verstappen doing the same, that they would be hailed heroes is utterly stupid. That was me. But Gordon saying, totally agree. Anyone else in that position, the media and fans would be gushing over them. Stroll could help himself and use his mirrors once in a while, though. So, yeah, that's a fair point. It's a fair point. David says, is it just me or does cycling sound very dangerous? All these people breaking their bones out cycling. Fair point. Everyone in the pit lane at the moment, that's why we are having a bit of scaphoid, was that the word? Scaphoid chat. The Ferraris are out doing some long runs at the moment, both lapping in the low 1 minute 39s, but everybody else is in the pit lane right now.
So we just saw a little close-up shot of Lewis Hamilton sitting in the pit lane in his Mercedes, and saw a nice little shot of his little sparkly diamond stud in his nose. Now, he's had clearance from the FIA that he is allowed to wear that. So we had a little bit of a jewellery gate yesterday with the FIA, but he's had confirmation that he can wear his nose stud for the season.
Okay. Well, that's nice that that's not going to run in a nonsense way like it did last season. We have got 20 minutes and 5 seconds to go. Rosanna?
Well, I'm just going to add an S to that stud word, because he's actually got 2 nose studs now. So another problem, perhaps. So 2, and that would make me think he's had it done recently, and you don't take a piercing out until, at least a couple of months. That's what I've done anyway with my ear piercings. So I kind of feel he's now got 2 studs in his nose, which is totally cool, and if that's how he chooses to live his life, that's great. But gosh, it's going to create more problems, I guess, because it's a recent acquisition.
Nothing sells. You know what, Rosanna? Nothing sells anything like you saying "totally cool." Describing someone's attire as totally cool.
I wish I could be as cool as Lewis.
We all do, don't we?
Yeah, I wish I could rock a nose stud, and I would try, but I think I'd probably get in trouble. My parents would probably tell me off still, and I'm 35. But yeah, I'd love to have the style like Lewis, but I don't. I tried it, actually. I got a few extra piercings, and I had to take them out because they just didn't suit me.
Oh, really? What, all up in the ear?
Yeah, not up high, just on the loob.
Oh.
But yeah, so he's
on
got
the Sebastian.
2. Yeah, I love that. That's very good WRC chat, just dropping it in there for everyone. Just on that injury thing as well, I was thinking, Marc Marquez, let's go full motorsport. He's jumped back on the bike, and his shoulders and all sorts of tatters. So you don't want to.
Does he still have double vision or something, Marquez? Or one of the riders said, oh yeah, they got back on the bike and still had double vision or something. They're a different breed, those lot.
Yeah, I mean, every single athlete. We're talking about high performance athletes. This is you as well, Sam. You are all built of different stuff. So yeah, it's something I can't even understand, but. Yeah, there you go. It's sort of half busy, half not busy down here in the pit lane. When you said everyone was in, suddenly they all started leaving again. And I have to tell you, it's absolutely scorching down here. So quite looking forward to the temperatures falling for qualifying.
Yeah, it was the start of it was the start of the season last year. Marquez had a high side in Indonesia in the morning warm-up. Didn't race, and then he did ride, and then had double vision or something like that, something along those lines.
So just aim for the apex in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a little bit sidetracked. I just want to talk about Oscar Piastri and say that I think he's doing a very solid job so far today, outpacing his experienced teammate Lando Norris by roughly 0.3 of a second, Joe.
Yeah, that's a reasonable run from Oscar Piastri, who looked like he was struggling a little yesterday, but he's quicker than Norris so far today by 0.3 of a second. The full order, for what it's worth, Joe's flying. Joe's flying on a set of soft tyres here in the Alfa Romeo. He's about to come through the middle sector split, and compared to Fernando Alonso, he's just 100th down on Fernando Alonso. There were a few people saying watch out for Alfa Romeo, that they could be fighting right at the front of the midfield, and that certainly is being borne out with this current lap from Zhou Guanyu out of the final corner and across the line. Where does this put him? Up in the Mercedes-Ferrari mix. Yes, second. 600ths away from Alonso, but Stroll has just done the fastest first sector of anybody and is now coming through the middle sector now. At the moment, it's Alonso, Zhou, Hamilton, Sainz and Leclerc, the top 5, but these are the first laps from Zhou and Stroll on a new set of soft tyres, so they're second runs of the session, so you'd expect them to find a bit more pace, and Stroll's only 0.004 down here on Fernando Alonso. A little bit of a wobble on the exit of turn 13. One more corner to come, and he might usurp Fernando Alonso here. Again, this is Stroll's second run. Alonso's only done one. Stroll neat and tidy through the final corner, out across the line, and the top of the times is an Aston Martin 1-2. Lance Stroll on a 32.9, 0.2 ahead of Fernando Alonso on a 33.1. Zhou is third on a 33.1. Then Hamilton in fourth, Sainz in fifth, Leclerc in sixth. Sainz and Leclerc, I think they're still on their original set of tyres, aren't they? Yeah, they haven't been in to put new tyres on just yet. Albon's gone 10th fastest, 9/10 slower than Lance Stroll.
I think that puts the hand injury question to bed.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that he's capable of doing a time like that. Aston Martin clearly working very well, as is, as we just said, the Alfa Romeo, Jack.
Yeah, Valtteri Bottas has just had a lock-up on that last lap, which cost him a bit of time, and so only went 9th quickest. But in fact, he bailed out of that lap and is now doing another one. But it is Stroll and Alonso, first and second. Here's Stroll's radio.
Good improvement, tidy turn 1-2.
Tidy turns 1 and 2 is the message to Stroll. So that was the corner he was struggling with yesterday, but they've worked out how to sort of do it a little bit.
I think that he was a little bit more hampered yesterday, probably because the hand was a bit stiff. I think his worry will be later on towards the race ending tomorrow afternoon, when he's going to have a lot of maybe cramps, some stiffness in that hand, or indeed both hands. I think he'll be fine today in qualifying, and he can get through it with adrenaline and talent.
So he says on hashtag BBCF1, with all this broken bones talk, just wanted to join in and tell you my horse broke my fingers a few weeks ago. So it's not just cycling that's dangerous.
Stay away from horses.
Well, that's always my motto. I don't like horses at all. No offence to any horses listening, but I
don't think any horses are listening.
You never know. Maybe they put like Sports Extra on at the stables or something.
They're too busy watching Neighbours. Oh, there we go. I'm here all week.
That's quite. Have you made that? That's really quick wit.
I know.
Did that come out of nowhere?
Absolutely nowhere. I was quite happy with that.
I'm so impressed.
Thank you.
That's one of your. Look, I've commentated on you for a long time. That's one of my favourite things you've ever done. That was absolutely superb. That and Buenos Aires Season 2 are my 2 Sandbird highlights. 13 and a half minutes to go. And the Ferraris, as I say, still out on old tyres. Hamilton has just gone out on a fresh set of softs. He is coming into the final sector now, so he's about to do a quick lap. The order at the moment: Stroll, Alonso, Joe, Hamilton, Sainz the top 5. Stroll and Joe have done a second run. Leclerc, Bottas, Sargent, Verstappen and Ocon the top 10. That's a solid effort from Logan Sargent, actually. 2/10 quicker than Alex Albon. Both doing sort of representative same run plans, and so that's very good from the American. Albon's 11th, Gasly, Perez, Piastri and Russell the top 15. And then Tsunoda, Norris, De Vries, Hulkenberg and Magnussen, the 20 drivers at the moment. And Stroll is quickest.
We are yet to see anything really representative from the Haas team. They've been running around all session on the medium compound, so looking forward to seeing what they can do, because Hulkenberg yesterday in FP2 was lightning fast.
Yeah, he was actually, wasn't he? That sort of came out of nowhere. 12 minutes and 20 seconds remaining. Right, Hamilton is on a quick lap at the moment, as is George Russell. Russell languishing down in 15th place, but through the first sector, he's over a 10th up on Lance Stroll. Hamilton comes through the first sector, and he is 2/10 up on Stroll. So Hamilton quicker than Russell in sector 1. Again, these are the second runs for the Mercedes duo. Haven't seen Alonso out yet. Haven't seen actually, Verstappen's just left the pits as I speak. So Verstappen makes his way out of the pit lane. We'll get his lap time in a few moments. Hamilton now coming through the middle sector, as is George Russell. Down the back straight, up to 180, 90 miles an hour before swinging into the left-hander of turn 11. We'll get their middle sector splits in a moment. Both are looking quicker than Stroll at present. Russell by almost 2/10 of a second now. Hamilton comes through the middle sector, and he's 4/10 up on Lance Stroll. So it looks like there's quite a big track evolution incoming, because the Mercedes are about to find a second here. Hamilton did a 33.5 basically last time around. George Russell comes through now, and he does a 1 minute 32.7. So he finds almost a second on Hamilton's time. Hamilton finds exactly a second on his own best. So a 32.555 for Lewis Hamilton, quickest of anyone so far, then dives out the way at the last minute of who was that coming? It was a Williams of Albon charging down into turn 1, and as a result he was rapid going into the first corner, Alex Albon, because he had a beautiful slipstream and tow from the Mercedes in front. But Hamilton quickest, Russell second, Stroll third, Alonso fourth, but he's on an outlap. Matthew says, Sam's neighbour's joke just made me groan out loud so badly. A random dog turned around to give me a dirty look.
Sorry, he didn't approve.
Yeah.
I thought it was good. Jack thought it was even better.
I loved it. Jonas says, great to hear Sam on the airwaves. I met Sam in Macau when I was a kid and he was in F3. He was so kind and generous with his time.
Yeah, my rears were so hot already to start with.
Yeah, copy that.
So, here comes Verstappen. DRS open. Down the start-finish straight in the Red Bull. This is the last representative look we will get before qualifying gets underway in a few hours' time. Gets underway at 6, so about 2.5 hours' time from now, qualifying will be beginning. You can hear it here on the BBC Sport website or on 5 Sports Extra. Wherever you're listening now, you'll be able to hear qualifying then. Verstappen through Sector 1. He's slower than Hamilton. Verstappen is slower than Hamilton by 0.02 of a second. Into the middle sector now. Finding a bit of time in turn 8. It felt like it took him a bit of time to pick up the throttle, but now coming into turns 9 and 10. Alonso has just started a lap now, and his first sector is fractionally slower than Hamilton's as well. Verstappen up through the gears. Piastri goes up into 4th place, only a 10th slower than Lance Stroll, and only 4/10 slower than the Mercedes. So that is encouraging from Oscar Piastri. Verstappen through the middle sector split, and he's up on Hamilton by 1/4 of a second. One more corner to go. Alonso through the middle sector split, and he is up on Hamilton by 1/10 of a second. So there's just 1/10 between Verstappen and Alonso at the moment. Final corner for Verstappen, fighting with the car a little bit on the exit. Comes across the line, goes fastest on a 1:32.345. Here comes Alonso out of the final corner now. Is it going to be quicker than the Mercedes? It's going to be quicker than Verstappen. Alonso fastest by 0.005 of a second ahead of Max Verstappen. Hamilton third, 0.2 back from Fernando Alonso. Russell 0.3 back in 4th spot. The Ferraris are both in the pits and haven't done their second run yet. That Alonso pace is legit.
It is legit. I just get the feeling that it was again a little bit of a scrappy lap from Max Verstappen. Again, he's suffering a little bit with understeer. I mean, if they can cure that, he could be a few tenths clear. But Fernando Alonso, make no mistake, is in the hunt this weekend.
7.5 minutes to go. Fernando Alonso, fastest. We'll see whether they go again. And, well, 7 minutes and 20 seconds left. They were so closely matched. I tell you what, the Alonso-Verstappen fight for the title was not the one I was ever expecting to see. And look, obviously we're way too early here.
Currently still P1.
Oh, really?
So cash. I didn't think I'd ever... Look, a fight for the title is strong, but... Like, kind of... I don't know.
I know what you're trying to say. What you're trying to say is you never thought you'd see Fernando Alonso win a race again, and now you're beginning to doubt that, right?
No. Yeah, correct. Never thought I'd see him fight for a title again. And I still don't believe it, right? There's something... What is it about humanity, Sam, that... Even when this evidence is here, there's still like a... but this is... We're not in for a season-long battle of Verstappen versus Alonso, are we?
Because everybody likes to just... when you're used to something, you agree with what you're used to. We're used to seeing Red Bull and Mercedes be at the... and Ferrari just be the dominant 6 cars in the grid at Formula 1. So when somebody else develops something that is as good as them, it's very hard to accept. You want to... hedge your bets with something that you know. The unknown is a scary option to choose.
So Sergio Perez on a lap now, coming up through turn 1 and into the next sequence of corners with less than 6 minutes to go. And we've got through the first sector, Perez did a 29.4, so he's there or thereabouts in the mix as well. Magnussen's on a quick lap for the first time in the Haas. Hulkenberg went 10th fastest, a second away. But Perez was pretty quick there. Not through necessarily 9 and 10, but through turn 8 he was very strong. We'll get a middle sector split for the Mexican here. Swings it into that fast left-hander at 100 miles an hour. At turn 11, through the middle sector, Perez is down on Alonso, but only by 0.03 of a second. Alonso's final sector was the quickest of anybody, so Perez might be able to get in ahead of the Mercedes here. Those Mercedes lap times are okay as well. 5 minutes to go in the session. Perez into the final corner. On the power. Out towards the line. Where's this going to slot? The Red Bull driver. Third. 1/10 of a second away from Fernando Alonso. But none of this is true, right? Because here's my next thing. Yesterday, Hamilton says we're nowhere, miles off the pace, on the wrong track. They're 2/10 off Alonso. They'd have taken that. But I know they're not. So this is why it's so frustrating in Formula One. Because you end up with all these facts that you know aren't true. Do you know what I mean? Because it's FP3, it's unrepresentative. I'd hate to be a writer on it, Andrew.
Yeah, it's not easy. No, I mean it is only final practice. We are only gonna know for sure what the pace in Bahrain is, at least, come 7 o'clock tonight here, 4 o'clock in the UK. But the evidence is there in front of our eyes, isn't it? You know, I don't see how we can deny it any longer.
But what about Mercedes?
Well, maybe they're better than Hamilton was saying yesterday. It's only him, isn't it? You know, it's only the driver of the car saying they're on the wrong path. We didn't say it for him.
Maybe we should have...
But he gave us the quotes and then they made the headlines. What can I say?
Maybe we should have waited to see what their true pace was, or whatever it was.
You've got to run with the story when the story comes.
They're off the spot. Left rear.
Okay, copy. We'll keep an eye on it.
Tear off court in the left rear for Lewis Hamilton. Right, focus now on Ferrari. Carlos Sainz comes around the final corner at turn 14, underneath the commentary box, flashes down towards turn 1. DRS wide open. 14th and 15th at the moment for the two Ferraris, but Sainz is on the brakes into the first corner now. Through the hairpin right-hander, Leclerc follows him through now. He's got a lovely slipstream down the start-finish straight, Charles Leclerc, so that's going to help him be very quick into turn 1. That might give him a 10th or so. Sainz turn up into turn 4 through the sort of slightly wider than, a bit of a wobble there for Carlos Sainz, and he's a 10th down on Alonso in sector 1. So a 29.5 for Sainz. That's the slowest of most of the front runners, I think, through that first sector. Now he's coming down the hill. Leclerc's 0.04 away from Alonso in sector 1. Hamilton actually is the driver with the fastest first sector. Everyone else is in the 29.3s or 4s. As I say, Leclerc has done a 29.4, so he's in the mix at the moment. Carlos Sainz coming through the middle sector split imminently. Currently the top 5 separated by 0.3 of a second, and Sainz is 0.3 down after sector 2. But he has looked a little bit messy on this lap. Charles Leclerc will come through that middle timing loop now. What's he doing compared to Fernando Alonso? He's only 0.06 away here, Leclerc. Leclerc could slot into third. He's got a chance of getting ahead of Perez here and making it Aston Martin, Red Bull, Ferrari, separated by less than a 10th. That would be quite something if he can pull that off. Coming down into the final corner now at turn 14, out across the line. Where does the Ferrari of Leclerc slot? Comes through 5th. Lost a lot of time in the final sector, Charles Leclerc, slower than Hamilton. But we've now got the top 5 cars, 3 different teams, separated by less than 0.3 of a second. We're in for a vintage year of Formula One, Sam Bird.
So far it's shaping up nicely, really nicely. You've got more teams in the mix than we expected. Should be great, Jack. If only it was like this every single race.
Yeah.
The other thing that I mentioned it earlier, I've got to say, hats off to Oscar Piastri, currently in P9. Norris in P12. Now, Norris, for me, is one of the drivers with the highest stock in the Formula One pit lane. You know, he's somebody that probably is deserving of a a race-winning seat. If anybody out there, he's the only guy last year outside the let's call it the big 6 seats to get a podium, and fully deserving of a race win at some point in the very near future. But tell you what, if he gets outpaced this year by Oscar Piastri, that stock comes crashing down at an incredible rate. I mean, I rate Lando Norris massively. I think he's a super talented driver, but he's got his work cut out with Oscar Piastri as a teammate right now.
Hashtag BBC F1 is just full of people saying how nice Sam Bird is. Mitch saying,
that's kind.
Another Sam Bird appreciation tweet. Met him and me in Donington for Formula E, and Sam even let me hold the wheel and took a picture of me with it.
There we go.
Lucy says, I met Sam at the end of last year. He was so kind. I asked if I could take a selfie. He offered to take the picture for me. Lovely down-to-earth guy who has time for everyone.
I took a selfie for her.
I think
just her, or was I in the picture as well?
I presume you must have then offered to take the selfie with your big long arms or something.
Oh yeah, with my spaghetti arms.
Yeah, exactly. Right, checker flag is out, and Fernando Alonso tops 2 of the 3 free practice sessions here in Bahrain for the Aston Martin team. 5 thousandths quicker than Max Verstappen. Sergio Perez in 3rd. Hamilton in 4th, 2 tenths back. Leclerc in 5th, 2 tenths back. Russell 6th, 4 tenths of a second back. Lance Stroll 7th, half a second away from Fernando Alonso. Carlos Sainz 8th in the Ferrari. Oscar Piastri 9th in the McLaren in what I guess is 9th now best of the rest? Maybe. 10th is Pierre Gasly. 11th Ocon. 12th Joe. 13th Lando Norris. 14th Kevin Magnussen. 15th Nico Hulkenberg, 16th Yuki Tsunoda, 17th Valtteri Bottas, 18th Logan Sargent ahead of Alex Albon by 2 tenths of a second, and 20th for Nick de Vries. Well, will it be this tight come qualify? If it is, then that's phenomenal, and it's not what anybody expected after pre-season testing.
I hope it's this tight, Jay. It was super exciting.
It's Hamilton's radio.
So I think this will probably go red on exit. Just keep an eye for it. It will come and get you.
So that was Hamilton.
Come on, guys. This is twice now.
Oh, this is... Well, interesting. So I don't know what the other occasion was.
So that it was FP1.
Yeah, but he
came into the pits.
But he was out the car well early.
Maybe they just realised that they didn't have time to get the tyres on, get them up to a reasonable temperature. So that's 2 practice starts that they've missed out on. We thought that it was... They didn't want to do a start in FP1, but this one they've genuinely made a mistake.
Well, what a session, Rosanna.
Absolutely, and I've got eyes on Lewis as he's being reverse wheeled up the pit lane. All the mechanics from Mercedes charging down, of course, with the leaf blowers to keep the tyres cool. So they're wheeling him back past the Aston Martin garage, which is where I headed, because I thought I would come and watch the fastest drivers on the grid return to their pit boxes. But as luck, chance and circumstance would have it, both Aston Martins have been called to the weighbridge. So it's all random, but interesting that those 2 were called. So now Lewis is just being wheeled back slowly, yellow flag in front of him, so everyone knows to get out of the way, and he'll go back to the box. Unusual that they got it wrong there.
Well, and both Mercedes not doing the practice starts. Again, the only 2... Yesterday in FP1, Hamilton was the only driver not to do a practice start, and then here, the 2 Mercedes, the only 2 cars not doing practice starts. That's the other reason why the Aston Martin is not back in the pit lane yet. Jago says, Sam Bird once told me my shoelaces were untied.
That's nice of me, isn't it? An issue off the line for Max Verstappen. Looked like he went into anti-stall a couple of times, actually, on that practice start.
Andrew Benson, what is there to say? Is this? We're just getting a replay of Max Verstappen. Listen to this. Yeah, went into anti-stall. Verstappen managed to get it going again, but if that had been the start of the Grand Prix, he'd been right down at the back. Do we think the top 5 covered by 2 tenths of a second in qualifying is representative?
Well, usually, again, it's like, what I was saying at the start of the session. If this was a normal Grand Prix weekend, the final runs in final practice are normally when the teams get closest to qualifying trim. They always leave something uncovered at that point. You're not necessarily running your engine at its maximum performance. You might be running a bit more fuel. in one car, then another team is running in their car, so you can't be absolutely sure. But usually this is after Friday evening and the qualifying simulations then, this is usually the closest representation of what to expect from qualifying. This is not to say that the qualifying order is going to be Alonso, Verstappen, Perez, Hamilton, Leclerc, but it looks like a much closer fight than we expected, and the Aston Martins appear to be up there.
This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. Come back in 2.5 hours, 5 to 3 in the UK, 5 to 6 local time here in Bahrain on the BBC Sport website and Radio 5 Sports Extra for what could be a fascinating qualifying session to start the season.